Now, we're not just seeing art in churches. We see a lot of illuminated manuscripts, which is very interesting because at this time, right around the end of the Roman Empire, we go from literacy rates that are probably closer to 50 to 70% of the population down to literacy rates of about 5% within a generation. So illuminated manuscripts and books in general are luxury goods. But let's talk about the form before we get into the actual pieces we're looking at. Now, for the Romans and all through history up until this point, almost all knowledge is written on scrolls. Scrolls are very effective. You can simply glue pieces of paper together and read from the scroll just like you would a book. And as long as you're reading from start to finish and you don't have to store it, it's not a problem. But you can imagine the problems with a scroll-based library. So what do? We go from the scroll to something called a codex. A codex is simply a book, as you know it. But this is a new invention at the end of the 5th century, and it primarily comes from the Christian world. So in a book, it's easy for us to flip back and forth between pages. We can bookmark it and go between 3, 4, 5 different sections. Whereas in a scroll, you have to unroll the whole thing to get to different sections. If you want to search a book, you can index it, something that we're all very familiar with today. Whereas with a scroll, it becomes very, very difficult to do the same thing. And even if it were easy, you still have to unroll the entire scroll to get to the part that you're trying to find. A codex is arguably the single most important invention of human existence. So this is a new idea, and it will be used primarily, as I said, for Christian purposes, because the Christians are the ones putting out books at the time. And these books are generally made of parchment or vellum, which is animal skin or lamb skin. Same stuff your degree or diploma is made on, which is why we refer to it as a lambskin. Now, as we look at these, what we're looking at is a page from the Vienna Genesis. And these are named after the place that they're found, in this case, Vienna, and the book of the Bible that's written, because many times, especially early on, these are individual books of the Bible, not an entire Bible. And here the pages are dyed violet with silver ink, giving us this sense of value to the piece, very much like ancient societies making statues out of gold of their various gods. The text is in Greek, not in Latin. In the Roman world and after, if you are a learned person, you always read and write Greek. It's a sign that you are particularly well educated. And the image underneath it actually illustrates the text above because, well, there's some irony here. The person who bought it probably can't read it. It was probably left on a lectern or left on a table open for people to look at to show off your wealth, but you probably couldn't read it, so you needed the illustrations to explain what's going on, as we see in this case. So the relationship between the image and text is very, very close. And we see the image is unframed, very similar to what we see in children's books today. Now, interestingly, most of these are done by women, or we believe most of them are done by women. Especially the paintings that are in these books, although oftentimes they're signed by a male master. And we would see a continuous narrative running through the book. We would see these images one after another, which would serve to teach the person, even if they're illiterate, something about this piece of the Bible. Now, we also have the Rossano Gospels. And here we see Christ being brought before Pontius Pilate. This is the earliest preserved book with scenes from the New Testament. And here again, we have the text surrounding the image, and we have the image of Jesus. And then on the right-hand side in the lower register, we see Barabbas. And Barabbas is actually labeled. You see his name to the right of him. And we see Pontius Pilate passing judgment. So we have a lot of things going on here. We have this scribe writing down what's going on in one of those wax tablets that we saw at Pompeii. We see Pilate sitting here almost on a throne, at least in the form of a magistrate. We have a Roman representative speaking to him on the behalf of Jesus, Barabbas, etc., trying to get across what's going on. Now, in this case, this is fairly simple text, so there's a lot going on here. The text speaks of the judgment, specifically the second judgment of Pilate. And then the next page would go into the next element. And you'll notice the image of Jesus is again one of imperial power. He's wearing violet and gold, unlike the white that we tend to associate with him today.